Look, it's a great national institution. I think it's the most wonderful ambassador culturally for our country around the world. The only thing I sometimes wonder is, do they abuse their dominant position in the web, in downstream media of all kinds, to displace activity by local papers, by other media? And you have to wonder whether all that should really be funded effectively by the taxpayer. That's my question about the BBC. The other thing I ask sometimes is, why on earth can they not produce something that is quite as brilliant as Breaking Bad? That's the question I put to them.
OK. You wouldn't use those water cannon on them, though, that you've got spare there, would you? I mean, what on earth are you going to do with them? I
wouldn't. Well, look, let's just go back a bit. The reason for getting the water cannon was obviously that we had very strong requests from the Commissioner for the Police. We had ACPO chief officers saying that they made a formal request to the Home Secretary. It had the strong support of the Prime Minister. Indeed, 68% of Londoners supported it when they were polled. And I think that reflected their memories of what it was like, for instance, in Tottenham on one of the nights of those riots in 2011, when the police spent 7 hours basically being unable to control the situation. The horse charges weren't working. They didn't want to use baton rounds. They needed an intermediate crowd control option. And so that's why they came back to us and said, do you want water cannon? I don't want water cannon ever used on the streets of anywhere in this country. No, I don't want them used in the streets of Northern Ireland, frankly. But when the police make that argument to you, you've got to take it seriously. Now, I've heard what the Home Secretary has had to say today, and obviously I respect the care and the thoroughness with which she's taken her decision. I think what we will do is we will continue to maintain and to train with those water cannon which we have at our disposal. And if there is, and it's a vanishingly unlikely event, we must hope, but if there is another occasion in which life and limb and property is at risk, and the police really do need to be able to make use of that utensil of crowd control, then, as the Home Secretary has confirmed today, it will be open to the police to apply again.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have bought them, should you, really? You wasted £218,000 of London Assembly money. You shouldn't have bought them unless the Home Secretary had said that you could use them. You did. I used that argument I was pointing out earlier on with shoes. I say that I've saved money by buying them at a discount. But, the point is you've got them and you can't use them.
Well, we can't use them at the moment, and that is absolutely correct. We haven't been given a general licence for use. And I understand I see I listened very carefully to what the Home Secretary had to say. I must say that it didn't seem to me entirely consistent with our approach in Northern Ireland, where the people have exactly the same physiques. They're just as vulnerable or not to the use of water cannon. However, what we will do is keep these devices, which, as I say, I don't want ever to use, but we will keep them in reserve. And should there be another occasion, heaven forfend, then it would be open to the Met, to the Commissioner, to make a further application.
Not unless you got them fixed. Apparently they've got 67 faults and they're 25 years old, so they're rubbish anyway.
You can't have it both ways. I'm told that they are perfectly serviceable and they would do the job. They would do the job very well. But not that, and I stress again, not that we want to deploy them. Most Londoners...
You can't deploy them, Mr Johnson, because the Home Secretary says you can't, and she says they're not up to scratch.
Well, actually, no. The reasons for her decision were nothing to do with the serviceability of the
That was one of the
devices.
4 points she made. You were sat behind her. I saw you. You heard exactly what she said. They're not up to scratch. The water cannon has limitations. They're not fast and agile enough. They attract crowds. That's true. They attract crowds, is what she says, which is another issue. And also public perception. That was 4 reasons why she gave that you can't use these water cannon.
And I understand the points that she makes. I think it is curious that they don't seem to apply to the people of Northern Ireland. Most Londoners, when we asked them, said that they would like to see the police having these in reserve. No one wants to see them on the streets regularly, if at all. What they do want is to have is for the police to have that, because it's an intermediate weapon. Okay? I want to stress that water cannon are not a kind of utensil of last resort. they're between the deployment of police with shields and horse charges and use of baton rounds, which are extremely violent. And one of the reasons why the police on that night in Tottenham felt that they ought to have water cannon was just because the horses were absolutely incapable of making any difference, and the animals themselves were getting tired and vulnerable.
So just to clarify, despite what we've heard from the Home Secretary, you're going to keep these water cannon anyway, and the police are going to train with them just in case they can use them at some stage in the future. Is that what you're saying?
That is the plan, yes. And I think that were there to be an occasion, and it is vanishingly unlikely, and we must hope that it's vanishingly unlikely, were there to be an occasion when they might be a useful tool of crowd control, then obviously I imagine the Commissioner would want to make a fresh application, and I cannot imagine that it would be unreasonably refused.
So even though the Home Secretary, your boss, stood up in the House of Commons today and said, I don't know why you say that she's my boss. But okay. I thought you might take exception to that, but nevertheless. The Home Secretary stood up in the House of Commons today. She said, absolutely, under no circumstances can you use these 3 particular water cannon because they're knocked off, they're cheap, you shouldn't have bought them in the first place.
She didn't say, look, I mean, okay, I don't want to...
You're very brilliant. I'm going to use them anyway.
You're very, very brilliant advocate, but I have to dissent from some of the things you just said. That was not what the Home Secretary said about these machines. She did not say that they were no good. She had other grounds for objection, and the principal one was that she thought it would change the character of British policing, and she pointed to various studies that show the medical risks associated with water cannons. Now, to a great extent, I understand those points. I accept those points. I really do. I don't want to see these things used. I was persuaded by the argument. So, by the way, was the Prime Minister, if you remember, back in 2011, who came out in strong support of this, that the police should have them in reserve, that they should be there as an intermediate tool of crowd control. I have to say, I think that it is perhaps not quite as controversial an issue as people are making out, particularly given that they are used already in the United Kingdom.
Well, final thought. We've been asking people on Twitter this afternoon what you should do with these water cannon, given that you can't use them, at least for now. Some were suggesting that you could shower elephants. Others were suggesting it could be a game show, and others were suggesting that maybe you could use them to wash your hair. What do you think?
Look, all suggestions gratefully received, Kay. But if you don't mind, I've got to go off and give an interview to somebody else. I'm so sorry to tell you.
OK. As long as you did us first, Boris, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we thought it was funny.